One of the hopeful things that I've discovered is that nearly every war that has started in the past 50 years has been a result of media lies. The media could have stopped it if they had searched deep enough. If they hadn't reprinted government propaganda, they could have stopped it. But what does that mean? Well, that means basically populations don't like wars. And populations have to be fooled into wars. Populations don't willingly and with open eyes go into a war. So if we have a good media environment, then we'll also have a peaceful environment. But our number one enemy is ignorance. And I believe that is the number one enemy of everyone, is not understanding what is actually going on in the world. It's only when you start to understand that you can make effective decisions and effective plans. Now, the question is, who is promoting ignorance? Well, those organizations that try to keep things secret, and those organizations which distort true information to make it false, misrepresentative. In this latter category, it is bad media. It really is my opinion that the media in general are so bad, we would have to question whether the world wouldn't be better off without them altogether. There's some very, very fine journalists, and we work with many of them, and some fine media organizations, but the vast majority are awful and are so distortive to how the world actually is. That the result is we see wars and we see corrupt governments continue on.
Hey everybody, and welcome to our very special Halloween episode, the Free Assange Online Vigil. This is the second episode of week 62 or 69. We have 3,651 days of illegal and arbitrary detention for Julian Assange. We have 569 days since the WikiLeaks founder was trafficked from the Ecuadorian embassy to the Belmarsh prison, following a $4.2 billion international monetary loan fund to the nation of Ecuador. It is 68 days until Vanessa Baritzer is due to make her January 4th, 2021 decision on the extradition hearing itself. We have 1,239 days of federal incarceration for Reality Winner. But in good news, we have 226 days of freedom for Chelsea Manning. And as always, she does stream on Twitch at XYChelsea87. So shout out to her. She has been streaming Watchdog Legions, which is a pretty cool game. How are you doing today, Misty?
I was muted, but I am good. How are you, Andrew?
Oh, I'm doing wonderful. We are joined as well by Steve, but we also have our very special guest, Sean O'Brien. How are you today, my friend?
Good, very good. I'm a Sriracha. I'm very hot and spicy today and very energized. Yeah.
How are you doing, Steve?
I seem to be having technical difficulties engaging with the video conferencing platform. You're supposed to say who you are, by the way. It's a fucking Halloween episode. What the hell is wrong with you?
Okay, well, I'm Claire Dobbin, also known as Cruella DeVille, who is one of the prosecutors on Julian's case. So nice to meet you.
I'm Johnny Bushley, as Steve so politely calls him. Joel Smith, he's the junior sub third ranking prosecutor for the United States.
Oh, we got him.
Mega Brain!
Good morning.
Cool.
So I left my laptop charger and my dog ate it, and my good glasses are at my other flat along with my paperwork. So unless anyone wants to run in and say someone has coronavirus, let's
I
try
have coronavirus.
let's try and get through this here. Yes, certainly. Would anyone like help with a chair?
Oh, good
I can
Lord.
do this in a horrible British accent. I can. I mean,
I was expecting
it's
it.
in my
I
wheelhouse.
was expecting a horrible British accent. Actually, I'm a little disappointed.
Totally in my wheelhouse. We'll warm up to it. We will.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Don't want to scare everybody away right at the beginning.
You can't rush a mega brain.
That's true.
You rush a mega brain, you get mega mistakes.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh. I have wig hair stuck to my lipstick, fam. Sorry about all this.
Nice.
Oh.
Oh man.
This is gonna be a fun show, y'all.
Yeah.
It's a good thing I got my meds. I can focus.
Here. Strange Halloween though, huh? I'm glad to
Yeah.
dress up. I'm psyched.
So,
And no
Definitely.
excuses.
so who is our fine sriracha friend?
Sure. So I am Sean O'Brien. I work in privacy and cybersecurity. I do a number of things in that realm. I recently am the head of a lab that we're launching at ExpressVPN called the Digital Security Lab. So I'm very excited about that. Happy to talk a little bit about that. I'm most known for working at Yale University and founding something there called Yale Privacy Lab. We do digital self-defense workshops, and we have one of those coming up in a couple weeks. I'm the head tutor of a program at Oxford that's really exciting. That's a cybersecurity program. And I do nonprofit, sort of my own wheelhouse work, teaching and building hardware under the banner of something called Privacy Safe. So a lot of stuff, trying to change the world in pieces and seeing what we can do here.
So in that opening video that we played for everybody, Julian had some really interesting remarks about the state of the media, and this was years ago when that was made, and about how deceptive and just terrible in general what we know as the mainstream media is, at least from his opinion and point of view. How do you feel about that? Do you have any thoughts on that statement or of your own about that same kind of thing?
Sure. There's a lot to say about platform regulation, about the way in which, especially social media and the platforms we're using, are sort of becoming like mainstream media outlets. Traditionally, my analysis of the media is very close to the analysis that Edward Herman and Noam Chomsky have for manufacturing consent. I see the media as basically a propaganda machine of one kind or another, serving very specific interests. Many times these things are so codified in the practices that it's not as if you have to hypnotize people, obviously, to get them to say what is acceptable. It's just that you limit the range of acceptable discussion, right? You create things like commercial breaks and fast, 20-second snippets, infographics, all that stuff. That's the traditional role of the media that we're used to. In the last, I would say at least 4 years, but starting before that, we've seen a real acceleration of the media into these partisan sort of corners, right, of that limited field of discussion. And that's bleeding into the online platforms that most people use. It's one of the reasons, for example, I know you all are embracing alternative platforms, right? Rockfin, et cetera, et cetera. It's a huge issue. We obviously have some antitrust legislation coming through in the United States. I've got mixed opinions on how that can turn out. But generally speaking, something has to be done to free up the information system. Whether that's going to be done in a real way or whether it's going to be done in a tyrannical way that actually takes the rights away from small publishers and pretends to fix the problem is the question. And unfortunately, right now, the war is not being won by the small alternative free speech side of the spectrum, let's say. So,
I think something that's really important about what Julian was talking about in that video is that, when it comes to war, all of the media is on the same side. There is no partisan sides. It's, I have said before, on matters of war in Wall Street, there's one party, and everything else is used as a, to divide the people. And I think that that's something that people really need to start coming to terms with, because our media will never pull together faster than when there's a war to sell. And, that's something that it's amazing to me that people still don't get it, because it's like I've said, how many times does your government get to lie you into war before your sense of skepticism kicks in? So how do you think that we can kind of get people to recognize how awful the state of media is? Like, is there, this is something I struggle with all the time. I don't know how to get people to come to terms with this reality.
Yeah, so I mean, it's difficult. It's important to point out, as you do, that we should see the media as sort of one major entity that falls behind power, especially in the times when it needs to not do that, right? When journalism is supposed to be asking probing questions, doing actual investigation, and so on and so forth. So during the Iraq War, anybody who was around then or paid attention, or hopefully some of this stuff is actually being written down in history, we'll see. It was very obvious how everybody fell in line. They did their embedded reporting, right, where most people were reporting from hotels and things like that, not on the ground, or if they weren't, they were, with a U.S. military, unit of some kind, and very much biased, to put it mildly. We saw a lot of reports pushed through the media in what people call the left outlets, the liberal, neoliberal New York Times, for example. We also saw, obviously, the Fox Newses of the world and the neoconservative end of the spectrum also falling in line. So, yeah, it's great that Julian points that out. It's really important for us to remember that. I think it's especially important to remember that because we have someone in power in the United States right now who is constantly talking about the mainstream media and how terrible it is, and how much it doesn't give him a fair break, and how it's all fake news and all that. That's just a smokescreen, more or less. It is a way to sort of manipulate this message, which is real, right? Which has a lot of truth to it, which most people know, that there's so much bullshit in the media and there's so much kowtowing to power. It's a way for the president to kind of manipulate that in his direction as sort of a positive. And he's saying, I'm the one you can trust. What I say is truth, and what's out there is not. So that reminder, though, that, it's not just the CNNs and the MSNBCs, but it's also the Fox Newses and that end of the spectrum, I think is really important. How can we basically win or reclaim some press freedom? I think the internet, as I'm sure Julian noticed a long time ago, in fact, I know he did, and anybody really paying attention to what was going on the ground in the internet in the late 90s and early 2000s, the internet has incredible potential to free up the information system, right? But we have to not have handcuffs on us. We have to not be worried about being prosecuted. We have to not worry about being arbitrarily just banned from a platform that we've invested a lot into, as, let's say, an independent media outlet. We have to worry about not being, having actual threats physically to ourselves as well, and this kind of stuff still does happen, as we know. The folks who really threaten power have real threats against them, right? People are not going to just bow down, who are in positions of power, to an independent media that's asking probing questions. So yeah, there's a lot of tumultuousness out there. Social media does not necessarily help the way it's currently being utilized by most individuals, but I do still think there's a lot of potential for these grassroots sort of alternative platforms to take hold. We have seen a lot of positive energy in that direction. The fact that we can do a stream like this and get great viewership for it. The fact that there are still podcasts out there that are actually independent and haven't, signed censorship clauses with SoundCloud or not SoundCloud, sorry. I'm mixing all these up these days. Spotify. The fact that we're using independent media now and independent platforms is still, it's a sign that there's some hope. But we've got to fight for it. And I'll tell you, as everyone knows, next week is going to be pretty insane, at least in the United States, but likely in the information system worldwide, with the fallout from the US election. I don't think we're going to know who's president on the day of, and whatever havoc is wreaked because of that, the information system is going to be the primary battleground. So sorting through the news is going to be difficult. It may be a time for folks to try to take a deep breath, try not to get completely involved, especially in the partisan aspects of it, and start learning about other things that they've been wanting to learn about for a long time that are really empowering. So I've been saying to people, hey, you know, that book you've been wanting to read, this may be the week to start it. If we can engage in that stuff, and I'm not saying ignore the news, especially because the world is going to be very hectic, but this sort of constant just being online, just refreshing the page, you know, it's a sort of slot machine mentality of hoping that you're going to get something valuable out of it. And, you know, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to. So
we had an interesting question come through chat. What's the probability that we will be able to create our own internet backbone?
Yeah. So the major stumbling block for alternative internet is economic reality, right? For the same reasons, it's really difficult to ship a hardware platform, as I found out firsthand, that does these awesome privacy respecting features and allows people to share files all over the world. It's possible to do that. There's no technical reasons we can't do that, but the economic reality makes it really difficult, right? The primary stumbling blocks I would say that exist at the moment from an infrastructure standpoint are actually the fiber that goes under the ocean. One of the things that, if you're interested in this subject, you should definitely look at is a map of the submarine cables. You can see where they start and terminate. You can see how much of it is coming out of New York and terminating in London, for example, and how little of it is being spread to the global south and many other places where people live. Those choke points are susceptible, obviously, to surveillance. We're not quite aware exactly how the NSA does some of its mass collection on those cables, but we know it's being done. It's possible it's physical violation, exploitation of them, but it's also possible they just have, you know, people at the endpoints watching everything. So if you're going to build public infrastructure, right? Let's say I built a small, internet backbone here, and I connect to somebody in London or connect to you all wherever you are. You know, that I still have to worry about those choke points. I still have to worry about surveillance at those areas. I still have to worry about those kinds of problems. Our best bet still, though, is starting small and doing wireless networks, wireless mesh networks when we can. Starting with your community, starting with your neighborhood if you can. And a project I've been watching very closely in this regard is something called Althea, A-L-T-H-E-A network. They actually do something that's similar to onion routing for Tor, where they have an exit node where the traffic flows through, and they have an encrypted connection throughout, and they reward people for contributing to the network. So you can get a router or use your current router to support the Althea network, use a section of your internet for this sort of new internet backbone, using the existing broadband infrastructure, and potentially you can be rewarded with that and actually get paid basically for doing that. So those kinds of projects are helpful too. Don't underestimate the powerful. These things can be shut down, right? But we got to do what we always do. You try to do as much of what you can inside the infrastructure we already have, but always have sort of a mindset of building new things when we can too. So,
because I have a mega brain, I very nearly understood all of that.
That thing's a loaded weapon, man. I'm scared.
Almost tremble in fear of my mega brain.
Yeah, you know, I mean, these kinds of questions, which are great. I just, I don't want to be nihilistic. I think if we fall into nihilism, then we've already lost, and then why care at all, right? And the fact that this person's asking that question, or that we're here, means that we actually have some hope, even on the mornings where it seems like there isn't any. So, you know, I don't want to necessarily say things are worse than they are. But than they were 5 years ago. In some ways they're better, in some ways they're worse. COVID has amplified everything too. So it's amplified some of the positive tendencies, and it's also amplified some of the negative ones as well. So
boy, sure fucking has, man. I want to talk about this for a minute because one of the most frequent, I guess, I don't know if they're trying to be insulting or if it's just a default position that a lot of people have when they come at me is that I am a nihilist, and I'm not. Like, I generally, I have, at least I believe, more genuine hope wrapped inside my cold dead heart than most people do on any given day. And I wouldn't be an activist in the first place if I didn't hold out a ton of hope that there's a better like that a better life is possible. I think that people hurl accusations of nihilism when they don't want to confront, for example, the reality that we don't have a free and fair electoral process, or that our candidates are selected for us behind closed doors, and that we're, given this illusion of choice between candidate A and candidate B that will ultimately be servants to the real power behind the United States. And I feel like it's almost a juvenile accusation, when it demonstrates a certain lack of I guess understanding or overall big picture vision when people hurl around that word, and it fucking it just bugs the hell out of me, man. And
I get the same thing too, Steve. It's because you don't believe in electoral politics. That's why people think that you have to, if you don't want to work within the system, then you, are an accelerationist and you want to like burn the country down. And, it's this juvenile black and white thinking that people just can't break themselves out of. It's like, yeah, a Republican or a Democrat's totally going to save you. Okay. Like it's so infantile. It's really frustrating to deal with because, if you want to deal in electoral politics, I mean, fine, but be honest about what that is, because that's not saving anybody. It's really just not.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not necessarily fun to watch the things that you've been worried about for decades come true, right? And we're watching that with climate change and other things. Obviously the pandemic was sort of a linchpin that pulled apart a lot of things that were already, in a bad state. And we do have some opportunities, right? We're not out of the race yet, but people are going to say that they're going to criticize you for being a nihilist or being too negative because they don't want to actually confront the problem. And if anything, that kind of attitude, unfortunately, is the thing that makes me think we're not going to win on some days, right? I don't know if it's necessarily about winning either. This is where people like Chris Hedges, I think, are very inspiring to me. You do what you do because it's the right thing to do. You have morals, you have ethics, but also you can't sit around just being blinded and pretending that things are a different way. Who can do that anyway? Once you're confronted with a lot of these realities, a lot of this information, it's nearly impossible. And doing that is just going to be bad for your mental health anyway.
Bringing it back to Julian's criticisms of media that we opened with, we're kind of at this intersection now between Chris Hedges' statement, which I think you're referring to, where he says, I don't fight fascists because I'll win. I fight them because they're fascists, which is right and good and true and accurate as shit. But that's running up against this cognitive dissonance that lesser of two evils works, that voting within a system so that you can reform it works, and it's media's job to point out that, okay, so Hedges is right. It may not be a winning battle, but you have to fight it regardless because it's the right thing to do, instead of, oh yeah, well, if we just elect this Democrat this one time or this Republican this one time, then that will somehow change everything, because instead of having Goldman Sachs at Treasury, we'll have Goldman Sachs at Treasury. And
Well, it's
instead of
like,
having Raytheon
yeah.
at Defense, we'll have Kellogg Brown and Root at Defense. And instead of having a psychopath from the CIA at the State Department, we'll have a psychopath from the NSA at the State Department. And it'll be totally different as a result of this. And that's when you get hurled with, well, you're just being a nihilist. And it's like, no, dude, do you not understand? Did you not see the fucking WikiLeaks drop that said Citigroup handpicked Barack Obama's cabinet for him? Like, is it... Where is the wall that you have built around your brain so that you will only let certain amounts of information filter through like little arrow slits in a fucking rampart? Like, it's so exceptionally frustrating.
This is particularly true this election because people are trying to claim that they're fighting fascism by voting for fascism.
Yeah.
And it's bizarre. Like, you're voting for Captain Crime Bill and thinking that you're fighting against fascism. No, you're not. You're voting for slightly less obvious fascism. I mean, and people keep saying it's, rude fascism versus polite fascism. And that's not even true because Biden's not polite. He's still an asshat. You know what I mean?
No,
they're both rude. So it's red fascism versus blue fascism. Pick your flavor. It's ridiculous.
Overt versus covert is how I've been framing it. And look, man, I would be making the same argument if a authoritarian fucking commie was somehow at the top of a ticket running for president right now. Like, I don't fucks with authoritarians. I don't care what side of the political scale you're on. I will fight that every step of every way. And just like this country, very capitalist in nature, fascism being the merger of corporation and state, or at least economic fascism being the merger of corporation and state. That's where we've been as long as I've been alive. I don't know about everybody else. But again, I mean, if we were in an authoritarian regime that was leftist by nature, I would be fighting that shit too. Straight up. Again, on that whole like political compass XY thing, I'm in that lower left-hand corner with Emma Goldman and a stack of Kalashnikovs and a fucking barrel of whiskey, and like that's fucking it. That's it.
Hi,
that's
neighbor. I'm down there too. Hi, neighbor.
I mean, look, it's sorry.
Go ahead.
Well,
I like the analogy. It's just telling to me, obviously, that our citizenry and non-citizens, right, who should be citizens, allowed to be, and by the way, all the people who are convicted of felonies that should be allowed to vote, who aren't. But it's sad that we can't look beyond this sort of duopoly, right? That somehow you're a bad citizen if you vote for a third party, vote for an independent, even choose not to vote. I mean, there's a lot of decent reason, especially in places where the vote literally, it's not going to be changed, in Connecticut, for example. As far as the president's concerned, if people want to stay home, I don't tell them that they have to get out there. Voting is such a weak political action that has barely anything to do with us. We don't actually have control over the election and the outcome in any real sense. That's something I have to keep reminding myself of if I get into an argument or let's say just a heated conversation with someone. It's like, look, whatever goes on, whatever your prediction is of what goes on Tuesday and beyond, because I do think it's going to take a while, it's not like we have real power over that anyway. We need to exercise power where we can. We need to organize people. And it's quite possible, a Biden, Kamala Harris presidency will stifle the left energy that we've been seeing. Massive left energy this year. And that can be completely stifled. We saw similar things happen with Obama when he came in, right? Suddenly all the energy against the Iraq war, et cetera, was just gone. And it took years really to recover to a state where something like Occupy flourished, right? Maybe we'll get there, maybe we won't. I don't know. But I don't necessarily, either outcome is not very rosy for me. And it's just a difference in strategy as far as people on the ground. So we need to just keep that in mind. And, try not to fight with people you love over their vote. It's just not worth it. There's more important things to tackle.
I always find it interesting that people want to hold third-party voters accountable for the things that someone that they didn't even vote for will do or does, but they don't want to be held responsible for voting for Joe Biden and the things that he will do, or Donald Trump and the things that he will do. It's a very interesting Olympic level mental gymnastics that.
Well, you can immediately shift blame. And you can be like, well, Joe Biden didn't get what he wanted because the Republicans obstructed him, or
they're
shit
already
like that.
doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can be like, well, Donald Trump didn't get what he wanted because Nancy Pelosi is a wild-eyed communist, even though she's a 100 millionaire who fucking wouldn't piss on a worker or poor person if they were on fire, and is in fact like a torture-happy war criminal fucking fascist. But words don't mean anything in 2020. The definition of what shit is doesn't fucking mean anything anymore. It's incredibly frustrating to me the way that the narrative has been set, that anything to the left of Dick Cheney's trigger finger is automatically leftist or communist or like some dumb. It's the dumbest fucking thing on the planet, and the people that buy into this shit are just garden variety dullards who need an enemy. They need somebody to hate in order to function, and I don't operate that way, so it mystifies me.
One of the things about 2020, though, with the presidential election at least, there's only one national third-party candidate that's actually getting any credibility and recognition. Like, there's Howie Hawkins, but you have Joe Jorgensen, too. And Howie Hawkins literally is at 0%. But Joe Jorgensen actually has a chance of basically, because they have ballot access in the Libertarian Party in every state across the country, can more or less get national minor party status and recognition and government funding and all of that if they can cross that. I think it's like 5 or 8% barrier or something along those lines. So I think that that's something that's super exciting too, to try to find a bright side to the 2020 election.
I don't mean to cut you off. I have to grab an AC adapter, just like Steve. I'll be back in a second, all right?
Yeah, no problem. Mega brain. He pulled a mega brain.
Did you forget it at your other house?
I didn't make it to my flat.
Yeah. I was too busy with the cocaine and hookers.
I was just going to say that.
I like the sriracha chicken frozen on the screen as he's exiting. Oh.
I do think it's funny that in the year of 2020, the Green Party can't even manage to get above 0%. Like, what next level failure is that,
well,
y'all?
It's because you rig your own election in the party.
I know,
most
but
people
that's
join
it's just the people who are
happens.
still pushing the Green Party are getting mad at me because I don't want to vote for that shit. But, I don't want to vote for that shit. They shouldn't, talk to them, not me. Christ.
You rigged your primary in a way that would make the Democrats sit up and go, fuck, I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah. Well,
like,
you dead named him misgendered Chelsea Manning. Like, that to me is
multiple times.
Well, yeah, I got no time for that, fam, at all. And people are trying to say, oh, well, he's old, and so it's hard for him to remember. No, he grinned, what's he calling himself these days? Oh, so gross, dude. It just makes my skin crawl. Even
and look, man, now that Kevin Zeese was taken away prematurely from life, Howie doesn't have him to write these magnificent backpedals anymore. He's out basically on his own, and he's a milquetoast, garmless fucking loser. I don't know what is remotely inspiring about a Hawkins campaign, and when he gets less than 1% of the vote, hopefully it's a sign that you should look to, I don't know, something other than electoral politics as your solution to this problem. Like, we don't get to have a legitimate conversation about policy or politics or any of that shit until we know for a fact what our government does in our name and with our money. We're
Well,
never
and until
going
we
to
have
do that.
legitimate elections, we don't even have legitimate. I mean, you guys think you can vote your way out of this? Are you kidding me? I mean, we don't have real elections. We have, proprietary software that nobody can look into. There's no paper trail on your vote. There's no ability to, hand count paper ballots or to double check or triple check these votes. It's completely fucking rigged. And if you think that you're going to just vote your way out of fascism, when the fascists control the system, that's just not happening. And it's exhausting trying to deal with people who think that that's a legitimate path.
At no point in any country anywhere in the world is voting in a rigged system inside a duopoly ever going to be a sustainable path to fucking reasonable change. It's just not. Look, man, given everything that's happened since Sunday, since Whitney was on my other show, like, and what's going on in Philadelphia, and what's going on in the rest of the freaking country right now, like, why anybody is looking to a polling station as anything other than to block off, I don't know. Like, Sean was right when he said we're not going to have election day results on election day. Too many people have voted by mail. Too many people are going to vote by mail. It's going to
be weeks. I hope people are ready. It's going to be weeks.
Yeah, and that's weeks of sustained, planned chaos.
Yeah.
So, I don't know, man. Go find a spot in the woods for a while.
I got some popcorn. I'm just going to chill out.
Popcorn. I have a whole rack of really good books that I'm already in the process of getting. I'm glad Sean brought that up, because like my daily ritual is to grab a book and dump my brain out into it, and that's the only way I can sleep.
Yeah, I totally feel you.
I've got my ocean spray, so I'm like the meme guy.
Yay! Now you need some Fleetwood Mac.
No.
Nobody needs Fleetwood Mac. Really. I mean, like, even Stevie Nicks needed Tom Petty.
Yeah.
Oh.
Harsh.
Oh.
So could you go over the...
I agree. I saw Stevie Nicks with Tom Petty at Bonnaroo in 2000 and something.
I saw them in Columbus. They were great.
Yeah, it was great. Cool.
Okay.
Man, I haven't been to a Bonnaroo, I think, since like 2007. I don't even know if that was at the location that they wound up using for Bonnaroo. That might have been the
no, they switched from. No, it was Manchester. They switched in from 2003 to 2004.
That's right.
Yeah,
it's all sort of blending together. I got to tell this story because Misty's a 9 Inch Nails fan and they just broke her heart.
Dude, why you gotta torture me?
So in 2008, I found myself at Lollapalooza in Grant Park in Chicago, and 9 Inch Nails was the headliner on Sunday, and right before them, Flogging Molly played, like on one stage over, and I had exhausted myself so thoroughly in the pit at Flogging Molly that I straight the fuck up slept through like 95% of 9 Inch Nails' set. And it was just Trent in his fishnets with a little belly and a fucking, like digital DJ machine. Like, it was pretty fucking disappointing overall. The mighty had already fallen, Misty. I'm sorry about that.
It's all right, man. Listen, 9 Inch Nails got me through, like, my teenage and early 20s. So, to each their own, I guess.
Yeah, so what's the disappointment?
The Nine Inch Nails disappointment, he's voting for Biden.
I was going to guess. Okay.
Yeah.
This election is too important, Sean O'Brien. It's
Listen,
the
he's
most
a freaking
important election in your
winner.
lifetime.
I mean, it's class protectionism. Let's be real. He's a millionaire. That's all this is. So, I mean, I can separate the art from the bullshit, you know? You have to. Christ, if you couldn't ever like somebody because they had a bad opinion or a bad take, I could never like anybody ever.
Yeah.
Because everybody sucks, you know? See, and this is why people call me a cynic.
You could listen to Chumbawamba or something.
Ew, God.
Ew.
Just
That's
listen
just self-hatred.
to like Boots Riley and fucking 80s skate punk, and like that's it. That's all you can listen to.
I actually wasn't making fun of Chumbawamba, or I guess maybe slightly I was, but I shouldn't have. AK Press puts out their music now, so they're pretty good politically, but it's not really my style.
Yeah.
So,
No, definitely not.
um,
But somebody in the chat is asking about my floating head, and yes, it is Putin.
nice.
Yeah, just so everybody's aware.
So I've got a quick question about mesh networks. Like, what kind of things can you do with your communities with that stuff?
Yeah, so I'm using the word mesh a little loosely here. So what really we should call them is maybe ad hoc wireless networks, right? You can basically set up situations where you're sharing your internet using infrastructure that's not that expensive to buy. Or you may already have some of it laying around, or someone you know may have it laying around, right? Set up Wi-Fi hotspots, set up Wi-Fi range extenders, share within a small community the people you maybe live with a bunch of renters, or obviously there's a lot of college kids out there who can do this sort of thing. And one or two nodes on the network are the only nodes that are connected to the internet. So what's basically going on is you're routing everything through, a handful of folks. Obviously that requires some trust, but keep in mind, and everybody should, if you're using strong encryption technology, that shouldn't matter as much. And we're trusting our ISPs with a massive amount of, information anyway. So trusting a community member or someone is not that different. What kind of things can you do with real, what I would call mesh networks, where at a software level, they're designed for this sort of spotty connection and hopping on, hopping off. Those networks are really powerful, especially for rural deployments, where you may have a situation where you lose internet for, a couple minutes or hours or maybe even a day. And they're good at routing around, which is, what we're supposed to do with the internet. They're very good at routing around damage or nodes that fall off the network. So that's the primary difference. I would say doing real mesh networking is cool, but tends to be technically more difficult. Just getting folks on a alternative wireless setup that, let's say, is tied to an Althea network connection is a lot easier. So that's totally something you can do. You need to find somebody who's willing to share their broadband. And if you can find nonprofit organizations who are willing to do it, maybe pool money together for one connection, it's very valuable stuff. On top of that, of course, you can do VPN and tunneling and all of that stuff to add an extra layer of protection for yourself. Depends exactly what your hope is. The cool thing about everybody being connected to the same network, of course, is that you can start to share files. So you can do that frictionlessly. You can just share some folders to your friends, neighbors, family, and not have to worry about uploading things to Google Drive, uploading things to Dropbox, having surveillance that entire time that's involved. Then the other individual has to create an account with one of those services, download, all of that process you can take out by going back to old-fashioned sort of peer-to-peer sharing. And I do think that's something that's positive that may come out of the pandemic to a certain extent.
I was also thinking about, going back old school and doing private telnet boards on mesh networks and stuff, like BBSs and stuff.
Yeah, some people do. Your crowd is going to be a little more niche.
Yeah, I figured. But I'm more thinking for like rural stuff.
Yep.
I could see that being like for a community that is mainly off grid. Like, I could see that being kind of cool.
And honestly, when these communities are connected to the pipe, they're generally speaking connected at much faster rates than they were, 20, 30 years ago. Obviously, the infrastructure is a little bit better when they do connect in most places. So if you just have a nice static forum that isn't loading a ton of JavaScript and all this other stuff that these other services load, if you have just a simple setup, and there's a bunch of open source, content management systems you can choose for that, then you've got your communication. I'd also say if you can use a Matrix server and set up Matrix, matrix.org for the people listening, that's also very positive because you can have end-to-end encrypted conversations.
Yeah, that's what we use here.
Awesome. It's a little beefier. So if you're really worried about connection speeds and connection in general, it may not be for you. But
every time you're on and you suggest using something that we currently use, I'm like, yeah, we did it.
It's validation for me, big time.
it's good.
Yeah, no,
they
Josh is asking about the possibility of like off-grid options because we've had enough and we're starting the slow news day commune and we're getting the fuck off grid in the middle of nowhere in an undisclosed location.
Yeah. Well, listen, you got to meet people where they're at, right? So you still need to find people in the places where, the big social media places. But obviously using these alternative networks are really positive. Assuming you can build a good audience there and be sustainable in some way, yeah, go for it. I'm all about it. I've seen a lot of these technologies fail over time and have been, unfortunately, personally involved in some of these failures. So you've got to be nimble if you're going to take that path. But I think even just the act of going down that road, trying something out, it's empowering. You're going to learn a lot. You're going to be that much better when there's a crisis, right? Or the information system shifts in some way. Twitter is becoming pretty draconian pretty quickly, right?
Oh my God.
As you know, YouTube, etc. I mean, these systems may be completely untenable for independent news or independent discussion.
I mean, they basically already are. They've got everyone so siloed that you only communicate to each other, but in front of everyone, which is just backwards. And then on YouTube, like I know for a fact my show's days are numbered. I know for a fact, like they're removing videos from my channel without so much as telling me about it. Like it's something I just have to discover along the way. Which I did just this week, as a matter of fact. Like my view counts roll backwards now, and it's silly. And election day, I'm doing a special with Whitney Webb and Jason Burmis, and that'll probably be the last show they ever let us do on YouTube. But tune in for that because it's going to be fucking rad.
The sad part of it is,
that's why I've been backing up our channel.
It's so easy for them to do. Sorry, I keep jumping in, but it's not like they're using some high-tech. Everybody thinks they're using all these high-tech AI algorithms, and in some cases, maybe they are to flag things. But one of the things we found out during the pandemic is they were like, well, we're going to toss everything to the AI, and the AI was just like stupid, the supposed AI. It was probably very simple, from what I can tell, keyword blacklisting, right? Where they're just banning stuff based upon whoever your guests are, or once you're flagged, right?
Yeah.
It's not rocket science for them to do it either, and their ability to is really strong. We know from the Twitter hack a couple months ago, I want to say that was July or August, the Twitter hack of all those celebrities and everything, there's back-end administrative panels where these big tech companies are just watching accounts, and they're focusing also on these big influential accounts, right? Which should give us a little bit of pause. It means that even if you become a so-called influencer and get all of this influence, you can be censored at the drop of a hat by Twitter, or media marked as sensitive, or this information may be misleading, whatever the the soft censorship they've been doing is.
Oh, it might come from hacked materials.
Yeah, right.
Okay, well, it didn't come from hack materials, and we're forced to admit that, and we're actually forced to admit that in a fucking Senate hearing. So we're gonna have to walk back our position on that, but we've made it so the entire quote-unquote left, along with the entire quote-unquote right, is all fucking censorship happy.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the... Sorry.
It
No,
makes
you're
my
fine, go
mega
ahead.
brain hurt. It does. Hurts me right in the mega brain.
Well, so what it should. Mega brain will now be a censored word on these platforms.
I'm actually surprised it's not, especially after how deep in the fucking paint we went, like
Right.
during the 2 weeks that we were doing pre-dawn live streaming for Julian's hearing.
Yeah.
Like I that was some of the weirdest. I realized
It was awesome.
I realize what I
funniest
look
stuff.
like right now. I do. I realize that. So for me to say that was one of the weirdest couple of weeks of doing these shows should tell you something. But oh my gosh, man. It was some of the conversations that we had, like absolutely delirious and sleep deprived. Especially
There
with
was a couple days where like the first 45 minutes was like some grunts and a couple like and you know, just some random words, but mostly just grunts.
Man,
it was great. Still the funniest stuff.
I mean, I don't know.
Hey, it's good work. It's good work.
It was necessary work.
Yeah.
Kudos to you
There
guys.
was
for
quite
getting up and doing
literally
it.
nobody on the planet doing what we were doing.
Yeah. It's
Well, it
amazing
just
that
goes
you
to
did it.
show. Look, almost all valuable projects that are being done on the internet are being done by a handful of people. And for those of you who are activists, which is probably all of you, you have experience with this in your personal lives, I'm sure, going out and doing on the ground work. It's always a few individuals sort of holding down the fort, willing to be courageous enough to do certain things. And unfortunately, what tends to happen is a lot of that gets put on a small group's back, right? And then everybody just acts like, you know, that's an okay state of being. To give an example, on a lot of these alternative networks or free and open source software projects, when you really look into them or get involved in them, you'll find out it's a handful of people who are putting in massive amounts of energy because they really care about it, and so on and so forth. But I mean, it needs to be sustainable at some point, which is why I have sort of this tempered skepticism about it. And I don't know the best way to support people besides monetarily supporting people. And even then, I mean, things can go pretty awry. And obviously, you know, everybody's not sitting around flying their family to a private island.
Right, for a birthday party. Yeah.
The hologram thing today, by the way, was pretty bizarre. I don't know if you caught the Kanye West gave her a hologram.
Yes.
It's
So
like a deep
weird.
fake with a voice actor, I think, and then a hologram. So it's
No.
bizarre.
I wanted to know if it would recite the OJ trial.
Well, I was wondering if the sound clips came from appearances like that, or if they have home video and they just like I don't know. You know,
It's
they were
weird.
going to
Between that and the Amazon blimp releasing fucking service drones,
Oh God, I know.
like that was enough for me today. The only thing that I had to say about the Amazon thing was like, oh, cool, man. They set up a mobile trap shoot course for us. Well, that's awesome. I'm in. Yeah, that great. Thanks, guys. But the hologram shit is just it's too Simpsons. It is.
Yeah, well, I'm really looking forward to being hit by a drone when I'm driving down the highway, right? Falling out of the sky.
Oh, fucking.
These things are going to have more hazard to them than anybody wants to recognize right now. But, you know, if you can remove the last mile, aka remove any human interaction, then, you know, great.
Yeah.
I'm trying to recall where I was going. Oh, what I was going to say was on platform censorship, right? Obviously, big tech needs to be reined in. Obviously, the things that they're doing to ban people, censor people, and so on are really problematic. I am very much worried about all these attacks on Section 230, however. And I take that stance because it's going to screw over the little guys. There's no doubt about it.
Did you watch the hearing the other day?
I didn't watch the whole hearing, though. I can't stomach it. But pretty much everybody in my academic ecosystem is very much into this. So I get it from all fronts. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. How many hearings have we had so far? This is like the 5th or 6th one in 4 years, something like that.
Yeah, no, but this was like they got the band together.
Yeah.
And then they were like, okay, well, it's a greatest hits tour, so play Russian interference. Okay, play Iranian hackers. Okay, play national security, and like when they got to the bits about Section 230, the way that Zuck framed it was just so backwards from reality that anybody who has even an inkling of what it is and what it does should have been like, well, fuck that lizard person. I don't believe a single word that guy says. Like, I don't care what his human suit is saying right now. I don't. It's wrong. I mean, like, if that's not your default when Mark Zuckerberg talks,
yeah,
should hang out.
Think about who he was talking to, though, and these hearings are hilarious because it's a bunch of really old people asking questions about technology they know absolutely nothing about, and that's supposed to somehow get us effective tech policy. They
really haven't evolved from Ted Stevens going, "It's a series of tubes."
Yeah. Which I like that analogy. I think we need to go back to thinking about the internet that way, because right now everything's so mystical to people, especially the generation who grew up with smartphones, right? Is growing up with smartphones. They don't necessarily have an understanding that there is something like a network behind it. Like they know the word,
Yeah.
Anyway, I like analogies like that. But
no.
The Zuckerberg thing. I read this statement. It's pretty typical. Police everyone else but us. Trust us. We'll do fine. And they're going to twist the law in some way that is seen as a compromise that allows big tech to do basically whatever they want with some basic oversight. What that means, who knows? Probably self-imposed. They're probably going to allow the industry to do like Facebook already put together some sort of ethics board last year preparing for this. Anyway, that's going to be the way we're going to go. And then when you or I try to set up, a web forum or, anything that has user interaction, we're going to be immediately taken down. Our home internet connection is going to be, all those kinds of things are going to happen if the folks currently pushing through these laws get their way, and or changes to the existing law. I don't know what to say about a lot of it.
We have so-called progressive leaders cheering for this shit daily, like begging Mark Zuckerberg to censor us and to protect us from misinformation. And it's unbelievable to watch. And then you have the left, yes, queening them. It's amazing. I don't understand, why people are okay. I mean, I guess it's just they're authoritarian. They want somebody to tell them what they can and cannot see, I guess. It's just really depressing.
To some extent, I think people's reality has been shattered, especially within the last year. And rather than grasp with that, which is a difficult task, especially if you haven't worked at it, right? Trying to think critically and so on. It's easier just to believe that there's Russians just influencing everything. And I guess now we've got everybody, right? We've got Iran, China. They haven't mentioned North Korea yet, to my understanding, but it's
coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Venezuelan hackers. They tried that in the 2018 midterms too. That we had Venezuelan hackers too, because we were trying to, exact government in Venezuela and replace it with a fucking stooge puppet named Juan Guaido. But the Iranian thing is so confusing to me, because the first time we heard about it last week, it was Iranian hackers are trying to interfere in the election by, I believe, hacking into voter rolls or some shit like that. And then the next time there was a report on Iranian hackers, it was they're trying to interfere with Trump's campaign, which just, if the narrative is Iran bad because they don't want Trump to win, it's total confusion. Like they've mixed their narratives a little bit, and I think that they think that all they have to say is the word Iran, and people will be like, "Oh, that's bad." We've learned how to demonize entire countries that we've never been to, never will go to. We've learned how to hate people that don't look like us. So that's all we need out of it, is just a little bit of jingoistic nationalism to rile us up and make, enough of us pull a lever for one party or another, and people are happy with that. People are content in the knowledge that maybe their team will win, and it's the most Pyrrhic of victories. I believe, and I don't know why people are satisfied with impossibly Pyrrhic victories anymore. I don't.
I think there's three things that are worth noting about the narrative. Without going back into the whole history of it or even taking sides, there's at least three things you can say. The first thing you can say is that there's a kernel of truth to the concept, right? These platforms are extremely powerful. They're how information is being disseminated. They are rivaling the tradition, or beating in many cases, the traditional mainstream outlets. So the fact that they can be manipulated either by armies of humans or armies of software or a combination of both is problematic and does present a problem because of power disparity and et cetera, right? So because that kernel of truth is there, it gives sort of any partisan hack the ability to sort of manipulate it in their direction, right? The second thing I'll say is that when the intelligence agencies came out with their statement about these basket of enemies all just simultaneously trying to influence the election, I think that statement was sort of a power play on the part of the intelligence communities, right? I hate calling them a community. But they are trying to make sure that whatever the outcome of the election, whatever happens, they will have a strong and powerful place amongst the wreckage. This is something obviously we've seen for a long time. This is what people characterize as the deep state, although that word is so twisted now, I try not to use it. But that is sort of a nonpartisan, powerful wing of the U.S. government trying to cement its power by saying, look, we're valuable, you need us for this reason. But the other thing I think it also kind of did was potentially insulate the discussion in a way where the Democratic Party couldn't completely dominate the narrative. So now if you're briefing Trump on how these countries are supposedly, violating the integrity of our democracy, then he can make some sort of statement. And now that makes it a lot harder for the narrative to be, okay, the election was taken over by Russians or whatever it is, right? So that's the second thing I would say. And then the third thing I would say, which I find really appalling, and I've talked to some people who work in spend a lot of time looking at disinformation campaigns and influence on these platforms. We have tacitly accepted the fact that it's okay in other contexts to influence these platforms with money and power. So if you've watched, for example, what's gone on with mainstream media accounts on social media over the last year, there are these campaigns where all of a sudden you have hundreds of accounts talking about some old Disney movie or something, or bring up some Marvel thing, or stoking some fan base and using it with just copy and pasted, tweets from each other, right? And that kind of manipulation is okay. And not only is it okay, it is the thing that actually gives lifeblood to these companies, because they're the ones paying all the money for the advertisements, et cetera, to go alongside with these disinformation campaigns. And the idea that we're okay with our information system being ruled in that way is also something that we need to actually talk about and actually bring to the fore of the conversation. Because everybody just assumes that's all right. And I don't like it. I like The Mandalorian too, but I don't necessarily think it's great to have our entire social media just dominated by it for a weekend. So anyway.
So
An interesting Star Wars thing relating to censorship. I don't know if you remember when what fucking number it is, but number 7? No. Yeah, like whatever the newest Star Wars is, the one that started that series where Han Solo dies at the end. I remember.
Spoiler alert.
Right.
Spoiler.
Well, I remember
Christ,
growing up
man.
and what happens.
Johnny Bush League.
Johnny Bush League.
And then, and there was literally news stories talking about how good it was that social media platforms were censoring the ending of that movie and not allowing people to talk about it. Because someone would post about what happened at the end of that, and it would just get removed by major platforms because not enough people had seen it yet that they wanted it to get out there. So it was a really, just to point it back to Star Wars, there's a lot of weird disinformation tactics that got seeded in the public through even just Star Wars, but tons of movies like that too.
Yeah, these are information control tricks, right? And, the same people that are involved with entertainment companies and so on are the people being hired for political campaigns. And why not, right? Makes perfect sense. But, yeah, it's pretty shit. I will also say I don't accept the episode numbering scheme because George Lucas, he did not plan it all in advance. There's no... So I try not to fall into that personally. But anyway. As if the Disney Star Wars movies, I mean, the fan base, I'm sure, can talk a lot about that. And in fact, if you look in these fan communities, people are getting more and more savvy about the entertainment, that they're consuming. They're looking behind the curtain a lot more. They're talking about the ways in which scripts are shaped, directors are fired, for different, basically propagandistic ends. And, that's very interesting, and it's very cool that people are thinking that way, but I don't necessarily see why the dots aren't connected to the political system from those folks, generally speaking.
The same people that can wrap their head around a multiverse or 70-some genders still think binary in terms of politics.
Well, because what does that mean for your life, right? So there's this fantasy world that exists only within your mind that has all these crazy plots and terrible things and great things happening inside of it. But when you're forced to address the fact that 98% of the things you experience within your daily life are either funded by the state or controlled and functioned through some money scheme and propaganda outlet to make you feel and act a certain way, you have to then behave differently like the characters in those movies do. So it's a lot easier to pass off that experience of fighting back to the fantasy world that you can imagine.
I think it's really difficult for people to admit to themselves too that they've been had, that you've been propagandized from birth and everything that you thought is bullshit. That's a really difficult thing for people to wrap their minds around. Nobody likes to admit that they're wrong or that they've been manipulated. And so to be faced with the fact that your government is, the largest terrorist organization the planet Earth has ever seen, when you've been taught that we're the good guys spreading democracy throughout the world, that's hard. That's hard to grapple with, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, it can basically be traumatic for a lot of people, depending on how wrapped up you are in it and your family, right? I also want to be careful. I don't want to personally like sound like I'm some vanguard or political elite or something, and I have some special knowledge and so on. We all go through ideas. We all try to figure things out. We all have had and may still have, of course we still have, some ideas that are wrong or slightly wrong or a little warped. I think what goes on, especially amongst the working class and the working poor, is you don't even really have time to suss this stuff out, right? A lot of it is conversational. You're just shooting the shit at work, or you've wrapped yourself up in the identity, so you become the guy who votes for Trump, who's in your, whatever, working in the grocery store, whatever the environment is, office, et cetera. I don't necessarily want to even keep out, upper middle class jobs, or what used to be called upper middle class jobs. Because there are a lot of people who are grinding out a rough existence behind desks, right? And if your environment is that, if your entire day is not allowing you to have self-expression, or, people don't necessarily want to go home and do homework, so to speak. And, I don't know. I think there's a bit of there has to be some value and some reason, as you said, Bush League, about about people. It's easy for them, right? To just kind of veg out, or they're not seeing the perceived value. So why invest so much of yourself into this? And good luck now. The information system is so polluted in all directions. It's really difficult, unless you have a good, solid understanding of how to judge information. It's hard, to figure out what's right and what's wrong. And a lot of the people who come to, for example, privacy and security and so on, they may be doing it for so-called incorrect reasons, right? Misinformation of some kind. My job isn't necessarily to steer them towards seeing the light in that direction, but I do think when you start teaching them about information control and so on and so forth, they start kind of getting it, and they start to be able to empower themselves enough to make real decisions. That's the whole thing. If you watch just news on television and leave it on all day or whatever, it's making decisions for you. And that flip is it's difficult, but it's empowering. Can we get there? I don't know. Like I said earlier, I think the protests, the Black Lives Matter protests, at least to my mind, the aspect of them that is most powerful is how many people will be awakened by just being involved in an action like that.
That's always my hope. When what looks to me like any other color revolution gets perpetrated anywhere, is that the people who are physically out there in the streets realize, okay, well, maybe the leadership has different goals than I do, but now that I have multiple toolkits on how to be an effective organizer, how to be an effective activist, how to be an effective human being, I can take what I've learned from this experience and then go and do something that is much more legitimate, that isn't being bankrolled by the exact same billionaire sociopaths that bankroll our politicians. It's my hope, at any rate.
Right. Hold on a second. I just have to make sure a tortoise is not trying to escape.
Okay.
Was that the
Things
code?
you only hear on the Free Assange Vigil.
Right.
Our
reminds me
bottle of sriracha got up to chase a tortoise.
It reminds me of Elizabeth Beck with the goose.
With the goose? Oh my God. I don't even know. Did that happen on camera?
I don't think so. Did it?
I don't know if that happened during a live stream or not. But
I think it was.
I think that was.
It might have been.
Was our stream with the Becks.
Let me use this opportunity to plug tomorrow's Slow News Day with Jared Beck. That's going to be high test. We'll put it that way. High test. At least 180 proof episode of Slow News Day tomorrow, with the one and only Jared Beck. Although I wish there were like a dozen of them out there just raising hell all over the place. That would be fantastic.
As long as it doesn't come with a dozen of his wives, because that's scary.
Oh my
I don't know.
gosh.
The world could use 11
Elizabeth
more.
Beck frightens the shit out of me. I just want to
Shit.
say.
Yeah, she's scary.
Do we want to get into the Ellsberg stuff?
Yeah, we should.
We
because it's
do,
already
but real
returned.
quick, we got or at least I have a super chat from Red Sea Socialist. He says, "Thank you very much." By the way, Red Sea, replacing Trump with Jim Crow Joe is like pooping your pants and then changing your shirt.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's fair. That's tough,
Goats
but
and the
fair.
goats. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a very good analogy.
It is.
I am still terrified of Elizabeth Beck. Jack, yeah.
Yeah,
If
me
you're not
too.
terrified of Elizabeth Beck, like there's something not right with your brain. She's scary.
Right? And I have a mega brain, so I
Yeah.
am mega terrified.
Yeah. Mega.
Oh, just
I'm
because we're
Cruella de Vil,
scared.
for God's sake, and I'm scared of her. I skin puppies, and I'm scared.
Hey, just because we're scared of her doesn't mean we don't have much love for her.
I have mad love for Elizabeth Beck.
I just don't
Like,
ever.
I do,
want
but
to
she's
piss her
scared
off.
the shit out of me.
Right.
Yeah, I'll do whatever I can to stay on that woman's good side. Yeah, for sure.
Okay,
For
so
sure.
shall we jump into Ellsberg, everybody?
So real quick, Sean, let me give you
Oh,
the
cute.
opportunity to either hang out with us or bounce if you need to.
Cute.
From the end of Julian's hearing until closing arguments are submitted here in a couple of weeks, we on the vigil here are going through a different witness statement every time that we go live. Today we're going through Daniel Ellsberg's witness statement, and you're certainly encouraged to stick around. You and the turtle can hang out for as long as you like. But at any point, if you got to bounce, let us know, and we'll give you an opportunity to share some final thoughts and let people know where they can follow your projects and whatnot.
I think I'm going to actually bounce now, if that's all right.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Keep up the good work. Thank you for letting me join. I'm easy to find. Look up Yale Privacy Lab. Look up the work we're doing, ExpressVPN, Digital Security Lab. We're going to do some stuff about censorship, so that should be really interesting. And I'm on Twitter at Sean O'Diggity. I'm across social media platforms. Sean O'Brien, pretty easy to find.
And
Thank you all.
let's catch up with you
Thank you,
on
Sean.
Slow News Day here soon, yeah?
Yeah, definitely. And then I can do more hawking of myself. But thanks so much. Enjoy the rest of Halloween, guys.
Have a good one.
Thanks for
Happy
coming on.
Halloween, buddy.
Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sean O'Brien. You know what? I really enjoy it when he's on. He's just like what the facts are. Like there's no emotional manipulation going on whatsoever. He's a creature of logic, and I really appreciate that. I really do.
Word.
All right, you guys ready for me to pull up the statement?
Are we gonna do this in character voice?
No.
I don't know what my character voice would be. Just crazy. That's just me. That's just me. Like I can just talk like me. I'm good. All good in the hood.
All right, I'm gonna pull it up.
Hey, who wants to
I'm
start?
getting there.
I already have it up. If you need me to.
I would read, but when I
It's
read,
loading. Okay.
Come on, Megan.
Yeah, if you wanna kick it off, I'll jump in like halfway down.
Okay, so Daniel Ellsberg's statement was pretty long compared to some of the others. So we had to kind of pick and choose what we were going to include. We tried to get kind of the most relevant and impactful pieces. So we're starting out here with just kind of a little like sort of a background type thing. It says, in 1967 through 1969, I was a member as a consultant to OSD from the RAND Corporation, to which I had returned, of a McNamara task force, which produced a 47-volume top-secret study entitled History of the U.S. Decision-Making in Vietnam, 1945 through 68, later known as the Pentagon Papers. In this role, I had access to documents classified at the secret and top-secret level. In late 1968 and early 1969, I was a consultant to the Special Assistant to the President for National Security Affairs, Henry Kissinger, on Vietnam options and initial governmental studies on Vietnam. In 1969, together with my colleague Anthony Russo, I made several copies of the Pentagon Papers. I believe that these 7,000 pages of top secret documents demonstrated that the conduct of the war in Vietnam had, over more than one administration, been started and continued by the U.S. government in the knowledge that it could not be won, and that President Johnson and his administration had lied to Congress and to the public in relation to its origins, costs, and prospects. So that just gives a little bit of background about the Pentagon Papers and kind of his thought process behind all of that. Steve, do you need me to continue, or?
If you want to do one or two more, sure, and then I'll pick it up.
Okay, so the next one says, in fact, the disclosures that ended my trial on May 11th, 1973, daily revelations for 2 weeks of a whole series of criminal actions that the Nixon administration had taken against me to stop further truth-telling about government policy by me or others, further strengthened congressional determination to cut off spending on American weapons and bombs that were still killing Vietnamese, even though U.S. casualties had ceased. The first House majority vote to suspend funding on the war for bombing of Cambodia came on May 10th, the day before my trial was finally dismissed. In respect to the anti-war peace movement, I have heard and read many of Mr. Assange's public statements on these issues. And so that's just basically him alluding to the also incredibly illegal actions that the Trump administration has taken in spying on Julian Assange while he was in the Ecuadorian embassy.
And that would really be the whole basis of this case getting thrown out, more so than, well, I guess not more so, but on top of all of the other reasons, is this is literally, the UC Global case is a parallel to exactly what happened to Daniel Ellsberg.
Yes, and that was
that on goddamn steroids.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, yes, there was, plots to assassinate him and steal babies' diapers and stuff. So yeah, it's a whole hot mess. So that's just basically what Ellsberg is alluding to there.
In the same way that, like, we've talked about how the Stasi would look at what the U.S. does in terms of surveillance and go, fuck, I didn't know you could do that. Like the Nixon administration, the people that are left over from the targeting of Daniel Ellsberg are either part and parcel of the targeting of Julian Assange, or they're looking on in absolute amazement at the level of sophistication and the depths of the operation against Julian Assange, which again is a decade-long campaign to destroy a man and his publishing outlet because they printed the truth about the U.S. government.
Yeah.
So this would be slide 3. I have also spoken to him, Julian Assange, privately over many hours on the same subjects. Indeed, I spoke to him during the course of 2010-2011, at a time when some of the published material had not yet seen the light of day. I was able to observe his approach was the exact opposite of reckless publication, and nor would he willfully expose others to harm. WikiLeaks could have published the entirety of the material on receipt. Instead, I was able to observe, but also to discuss with him the unprecedented steps he initiated of engaging with conventional media partners for the purpose of ensuring that the impact of publication was not only widespread, but that it might be the most likely route to have effect on U.S. government policy and its alteration. When stories based on the Afghan war logs began to be published, I felt that the comparison between those publications and the Pentagon Papers was inevitable in one major respect. In terms of volume, there had been nothing like it since the Pentagon Papers. Jump to the next one. It was the first unauthorized disclosure of such magnitude in nearly 40 years. Moreover, it had the advantage of being more current. The most recent of the Pentagon Papers were dated 3 years before their release, but some of the documents in the Afghan war diaries were dated 6 months earlier than their release. There were also some differences which I noted. The Pentagon Papers were high-level, top-secret documents on internal estimates, alternatives being debated, presidential directives, and so forth. The Afghanistan documents are lower-level field reports of the kind that I was reading and writing when I was a foreign service officer in Vietnam. In fact, I could have written a number of them. They were very like the ones I wrote, with the place and names changed, which confirmed my view held for a number of years that I saw the war in Afghanistan as Vietnamistan, in that it was a replay of the stalemate the USA had been in 40 years ago. Do we want to pause here, or should I keep going?
I mean, I think, just to put it into perspective, even after all of this information came out, when we were supposed to have a peacetime president, right? Like, these documents got released, the Afghanistan war logs, the Iraq war diaries, the Guantanamo Bay files, at a time when there was a person in office that had run on closing down Guantanamo Bay and ending these wars. And
had won a Nobel Peace Prize.
Yep, for just saying it.
For saying we should end the war in Iraq.
And anyone can have any faith in a political process after that's happened is literally just lying to themselves. Like, whether you're one of the right wingers, that's why you supported Donald Trump to begin with, because back then he had an anti-war message. It's the same thing. Like,
well, he had a reductionist message. He did not have an anti-war message, but he had a message of de-acceleration or at least troop withdraw in the unpopular countries.
Right. I think
let's at least be reasonably honest about that, because Donald Trump did not run on an anti-war platform.
Yeah. I think it's also important, the fact that he's going over the similarities and the differences between what Julian released and the Pentagon Papers, because, I mean, it's like he says, the Pentagon Papers were, high level, top secret documents. And then what the Afghanistan documents were, it was like lower level stuff. And the fact that, Ellsberg, it's nice to see kind of the contrast and compare between what Ellsberg went through and what Julian's going through, and, how out of control this all is.
So moving on, back to the statement, Ellsberg says, my further observation is that the civilian victims of the population ceased to be seen as human beings whose lives had the same worth as those involved in the bringing of war to their respective countries. In those circumstances, crimes against humanity of the worst kind and mass atrocities could and did become the norm. My attention, as with the rest of the world, was God damn it, strike that. My attention, as with the rest of the world, was first caught by the video of the Apache helicopter assault in Iraq, which became known as collateral murder. That title, given by Assange, was often criticized as overly accusatory. On the contrary, as a former battalion training officer, 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines, and a rifle company commander, I was acutely aware that what was depicted in that video deserved the term murder, a war crime. In fact, deliberate as the killing of civilians was, it was the word collateral that was questionable. The American public needed urgently to know that what was being done routinely in their name, and there was no other way for them to learn it than by unauthorized disclosure.
I think it's hilarious that anybody who's ever seen the collateral murder video could ever say that was overly accusatory. That's right. Ridiculous.
Oh, that's a bit much. Sure, I just witnessed a war crime and they shot that kid, but
yeah, no big deal.
I don't know. Right, I don't know if murder's the right word you'd want. Or collateral. I mean, clearly it wasn't collateral damage, because they wouldn't be shooting at him if they weren't the bad guys, right? Right. Tell me that. Tell me that's right. No. We'll jump to the next slide here, and there's only a couple more after this. It is widely acknowledged that the copying done by me and the much later the publication of the Pentagon Papers can reasonably be held to have contributed first to the ending of U.S. casualties in Vietnam, and subsequently to the ending of the war and to the destruction of Vietnam and the deaths of its people. However, those effects depended in large part on the Nixon administration's overreaction to my actions. its actions having been taken in fear of the political consequences of better public information on a policy that was still being conducted largely in secret to hide its reckless illegality. That deserves a second read through.
Yeah.
It really does. So I want to kind of break this down bit by bit. It's widely acknowledged that the copying done by me and much later the publication of the Pentagon Papers can reasonably be held to have contributed first to the ending of U.S. casualties in Vietnam and subsequently to the ending of the war and to the destruction of Vietnam and the deaths of its people. Yeah, without Cy Hirsch, without Dan Ellsberg, without an editorial board at the Washington Post that foolishly and recklessly determined that the Espionage Act wouldn't apply to them, even though that argument was presented in court during the time. Without all of that, a number of things wouldn't have happened, including troop withdrawal and the end of aggression in Vietnam. But what it also did too, and the reason that Ellsberg notes right at the top that it had been basically 40 years since anyone had seen a document dump like that related to military activity, is it unified the duopoly in making sure that U.S. citizens would never get that close to war ever again. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's when we stopped seeing the actual reality of war on television, and we haven't seen it since. And by the time the Gulf War rolled around and CNN became a thing as a result of it, it was only you get to see us drop missiles on the bad guys. You get to see our troops, maybe giving a kid a stuffed animal. And that's all you get to know about the war. He says, however, those effects depended in large part on the Nixon's administration's overreaction to my actions. Okay, let's break this down a little bit. Its actions having been taken a fear of the political consequences of better public information on policy that was still being conducted largely in secret to hide its reckless illegality. We have on tape so many times politicians, everyone from like Nancy Pelosi to Ted Cruz to even fucking the clapback queen herself saying, you guys don't want to know how the sausage gets made. You don't. You don't want insight into the legislative process. It's a lot of words. It'll hurt your little peasant brains. You trust us to get this done. And that is so fucking disgusting. I can't stress that enough.
Especially given that all that we know that they've done. Like we have actual evidence of war crimes and them lying us into war and all of the, I mean, it's not like we don't know that they're doing it, but then they expect us to just trust them. And this time I'm sure it's different.
I mean, it really is.
The most important this time.
Yes.
Didn't you see that paid advertisement?
Right? Oh.
Every election has been the most important election in my lifetime, and
Yes.
every election has yielded the worst president in my lifetime because every fucking president has been increasingly shittier, increasingly draconian, and
That's
increasingly
exactly what
authoritarian.
evilism gets you.
Yeah.
That is exactly what it gets you.
And largely that has to do with the way that elections are funded and the access to public information for who's actually pulling the strings and making decisions. Not to throw it into left field, but just public information and elections. It just makes me think of organizations like ALEC that go around the country putting hyper fascist bills into state legislatures and then are just allowed to basically operate in the shadows. Because when you start talking to people about who actually writes the bills that get passed, you get this whole like, oh, well, whatever reaction from the majority of the population.
Jumping back into this because it does relate to that, and especially the last sentence that we just read off of the slide. about the Nixon administration's actions and the root cause of them being taken in fear of the political consequences of better public information on a policy that was being done in the dark. That's damn near all of our legislative process now. Like, I know C-SPAN be damned, dude. It's not like even the sitting members of Congress themselves read what's in the legislation. We've got to pass it before we read it. It's that important.
Right.
How many different fucking nightmarish pieces of legislation did we hear that about in the last 20 years?
I mean, look at the Cloud Act and how that passed on the tail end of an omnibus spending bill. And when you say Cloud Act, people are like, what the hell is the Cloud Act? It's the act that moved the authority to distribute United States citizens' information to other governments from the judicial branch to the executive branch. So Trump or someone he appoints literally can sign off on your personal data being given to another country.
Well, just look at PAYGO. Nancy Pelosi's like, we're going to pass PAYGO, but then we're going to fight it. Where's that at? Where's that fight at? I must have missed it. Did I miss it? I missed it again. I always miss the things, like the burning of the thing. I miss that shit all the time.
So if you're not sure what Misty's referring to right there were a number of prominent blue check liberals that were claiming that they would burn the country down if Amy Coney.
If they even try to replace RBG, we're going to burn it down. Oh, no, we're going to burn the whole thing down. Well, did I miss it? I missed the burning of the thing? Somebody forgot their lighter at brunch, I think.
Right. It was a no fire lit smoking of any kind brunch. So everybody just had a vape with them, and then they couldn't burn the thing.
Damn it.
Let's try to get through these couple of slides.
Sorry.
As has become very well known, after the publication of the papers, President Nixon was so disturbed by the media's portrayal of my actions that he ordered his aides to look for damaging personal information to destroy my reputation. Don't worry about his trial, the president told then Attorney General John Mitchell. Just get everything out. We want to destroy him in the press.
That's what they do.
That's the same pattern that you've seen with how they've treated Julian.
Yeah.
From everything from he put people at risk or he helped kill informants to he's a rapist.
They do this to everybody. If you look, whoever they're smearing the most in the press, that's probably going to be your biggest ally because that's how they operate. I mean, they did it to Bernie Sanders, even though he wasn't really much of a threat. But
or
they
much
do
of an ally.
Right. But they do it to Julian Assange. I mean, anybody who poses a real threat to them, the first thing that they do is attack you in the media because that just helps manufacture the consent for the shitty ass treatment you're about to get.
So moving on, because we've only got two of these. Bernard Baker, a CIA asset, later told me that his mission was to break both of my legs, and I later learned from the special prosecutor in their case that there was a plan for these CIA assets to attack me in the course of a rally that I was speaking to on the steps of the Capitol on May 3rd, 1972. 3 days before my trial came to an end, evidence of unlawful wiretapping surveillance surfaced. The trial judge, William Byrne, on May 11, 1973, stated, quote, "The totality of the circumstances of this case offend a sense of justice. The bizarre events have incurably infected the prosecution of this case," end quote. He dismissed all charges with prejudice so that I could not face these charges again. My lawyer's question as to why I had copied the Pentagon Papers, in part, to explain my judgment that the documents were improperly classified to keep them not from an enemy, but from the American public, and to argue the necessity, therefore, of their being made public because of their content. The court ruled the question as irrelevant, and I was silenced before I could begin. My lawyer said that he had never heard of a case where a defendant was not permitted to tell the jury why he did what he did. Well, here we have an exact parallel. With Julian's case, were it to wind up in a U.S. jurisdiction, because the Espionage Act has no public interest defense. Not only would Julian not have an opportunity to discuss why he did what he did, which includes the founding of WikiLeaks and everything that they've released, he's legally forbidden to do so. Like, if his legal team were to be like, but the public, then they're done. That's it. You're censured. You're found in contempt for violating one of the cardinal rules in an Espionage Act case. Just let that shit sink in for a minute. You know, the lack of public interest defense is insane to me. Last slide. Without the revelation of these supervening illegal events above, if facing the same circumstances today and charged under the Espionage Act, I am certain that I would be convicted. I observe that this has been the pattern since in prosecutions under the Espionage Act of whistleblowers seeking to raise the public interest attaching to the publications in question. I noted that the military judge at the trial of Chelsea Manning did not allow Manning or her lawyer to argue her intent. Lack of damage to the U.S., overall classification of the cables, or the benefits of the leaks until she was already found guilty. Marinate on that for a second. Like, the fact that there's no allowable room for rationale until you've already been convicted.
I mean, listen, I'm a true crime nerd, and intent is everything in a defense. I mean, that to not be able to use that as part of your ability to defend yourself is crazy to me. That's a huge part of why people do the things that they do. I mean, to not even be able to mention it in a courtroom and to argue the fact that what you just did is hugely beneficial to humanity, and that's why you did it, that's scary. I mean, to not be able to defend yourself in that way is really terrifying.
And it just, it speaks to the secret nature, not only of espionage court and the grand jury process, but justice in general in the United States. We're supposed to be, according to the marketing and the propaganda, a bastion of freedom and hope in the world, where democracy was, you know, not born, but perfected. And the hubris involved in that statement is off the fucking charts. One, like, it's just ridiculous on its face. But the fact that we have coded into our legal system a removal of the public interest defense, or if we give this person more jail time and more punitive fines in the hopes that we break this person, that's legal, but we have to stop if it looks like this person isn't going to be broken. But that's only a determination that the judge can make, not a determination that the individual can make.
And that's this also, you know, just to throw it back out there again, this is something that Tulsi's bill on the Espionage Act addresses. So, you know, call some people and, you know, politely harass them to co-sponsor her bill, because that's what she's looking at as far as reforming the Espionage Act, which frankly, it should just be abolished. But, you know, the fact that she wants to now allow for a public interest defense. Hi, Daryl. Anyway, yeah, so
Daryl, you're lucky you're not a Dalmatian.
So true. Look at him. Yes, we're talking about you, jackass. Hi, buddy. Yeah, so you know, try to get some people to co-sign onto that bill, or, you know, talk about it with your friends, discuss why it's important. because that's something that she's trying to, introduce into the Espionage Act, and being able to allow people being charged under that to issue or to, provide a public interest defense, which is important. If we're going to have the Espionage Act, they should be able to, use a public interest defense for sure.
Have you heard anything from Tulsi's team about her coming on the show?
I have not. I was
Nasty or Tulsi about anything.
Yeah, I was giving them a week to get back to me. I figured that was kind of a polite reference of time, but I'm going to send an email and just kind of touch base and see where we're at with that. So, yeah.
By the way, if Eric Jackman is watching today, let's get on this.
Girl.
Let's get on getting Tulsi on a free Assange Vigil. And if Eric Jackman is not watching this, then I'll email him later. Yeah.
But
Sweet.
I think that's all we have time for, right? Got to wrap.
Yeah, I think, we got through the statement. I mean, if there's any other last thoughts you guys want to put forward on that, maybe.
Daniel Ellsberg makes such a wonderful and in-depth, I guess, statement, conversation, monologue, I'm not sure, but about the abuse of the classification system in the U.S. And he didn't necessarily go into his statement. I've heard him speak about it on Consortium News before. I highly encourage everyone to go and find Daniel Ellsberg talking about the classification system, because the way that the U.S. has structured it makes it so that even the most mundane, under extraordinary field report becomes classified. And he did do an excellent job during the hearing drawing this distinction, like the fact that what is in the Afghan war logs and in the war diaries and in the Iraq war logs, what it is such low-level classified information that it ought not even receive a classification in the first place. It's a direct abuse of power and an attempt to not only control the flow of information, but to control what is and isn't allowable knowledge to the broader public. And I can't recommend enough trying to go and find Dan Ellsberg speaking on the classification system, because it gives you such a valuable wealth of experience and knowledge. And it's something that you can have a conversation with just about anyone about, especially if you're talking to a veteran or if you're talking to someone in information security or IT or something like that. It's just, it's a really good in to discussing the broader aspects of the surveillance state and national security, or the new phrase national interest. So yeah, I would implore you to go look for that.
One of the things with Ellsberg's testimony too, and then his subsequent interviews, like when he went on TYT, Consortium News, and a couple other places, he talked about how there was this opinion of good Ellsberg and bad Assange and bad Manning, and how that just doesn't hold any weight. And I actually think he got to bring that up in the courtroom as well, that somehow he's placed on this podium as this person that got to do the right thing by revealing the Pentagon Papers, but Chelsea Manning got prosecuted and spent a decade of her life, basically her adult life, in prison. So there was I'm sure we'll come back to this a couple times, the Ellsberg, even if just in parts. But I'll put the link in chat for everyone, because it's absolutely worth a read through in full.
It's in the description.
And it's not just earlier.
It's not just that; it's the rehabilitation of Daniel Ellsberg, because at the time he was vilified.
Yes.
At the time, he was mercilessly dragged in the press by the government, by people who looked at him like he was some sort of turncoat or spy or traitor or some shit like that. So it wasn't until a decade or 20 years after the fact.
I just tweeted about this. I said in 10 years, there are going to be a lot of people who are going to pretend like they always stood for Julian Assange and that they always supported him. And I have a very good memory. I have a very good memory. And I'm going to remember all of you in 10 years when you're trying to pretend like you were on the right side of this.
Yeah. And by the way, we do have some, we can't wrap yet because there was a case management hearing 2 days ago. We do need to give you guys the information on that. Our good friend and friend of the show, Muhammad El-Mazi, was at the Old Bailey for this. He was able to get a couple of really nice videos with Rebecca Vincent and John Shipton. So we're going to go through that here real quick, and then we can close out. But I don't know what you've got queued up, Josh.
I'm going to play the Rebecca Vincent one first. Mute both of you.
Yes, sir.
I'm Rebecca Vincent, the Director of International Campaigns for Reporters Without Borders, outside the Westminster Magistrates Court, where we've just monitored an administrative hearing, a call-over hearing in the case of Julian Assange. He's required to appear before the court every 30 days, so he did so today via video link. Proceedings only lasted a couple of minutes. Judge Baretzer was not here today. She was replaced by Judge Ikram, although when he came into the room, nobody actually knew who he was. We had to find this out afterwards. Mr. Fitzgerald was there for the defense, and Mr. Smith for the prosecution. And the only thing that happened was that proceedings were adjourned until the 26th of November. Now, we've come in person because NGOs for the first time have been barred access to the remote telephone line. That used to be how we could access these sorts of administrative proceedings. So the only way that we as professional NGO observers could follow what happened today was to queue and to get into one of very few spaces in the public gallery. So again, this court has made it clear that restrictions on NGO observers that were imposed during the 4 weeks of proceedings at the Old Bailey are now still in effect for all proceedings in this case, which is really unacceptable and really presents a barrier to open justice. So we'll continue to monitor at Reporters Without Borders, and we will come and get in person when we can, because that's the only option that is left to us.
Hi, John Shipton here, Julian's father. Today the hearing at Westminster Court was a management hearing. The next management hearing will be in a month, the 26th of November. Meanwhile, the defence has made a submission to the judge to extend the time due for final submissions by 1 week. The reason for this is that the computer, the laptop, which contains the submission for Julian to review, has been delayed in the jail. So they've asked for another week. So it looks like the judge will agree.
So the prison authorities have delayed giving it to him, or what exactly is the delay?
It's the prison authorities, or the bureaucracy within the jail, has made a mess. It's got bogged down within the jail.
Thank you very much.
All right, you're back.
That's fucking disgusting to me.
Yeah.
Like,
But
not
big
only did he not
props to
get-
Team Assange London, though, because they're loud as shit.
yeah,
Love it.
absolutely, every time too.
Yeah.
But not only did they deny him a radio for like what, almost the first year, if not more, that he was in Belmarsh, until Nikki filed the Freedom of Information Act request about if he had gotten a radio yet. And then he got a laptop, but they glued all the fucking keys down on the laptop that they had originally given him. And now they are straight just delaying even allowing him to review his own court case to help with his own defense.
And this is par for the course. They've been doing this the whole time, fucking him over the whole time. It's like a human rights violation extravaganza. It's like one right after the other. And nobody seems to give a shit. It's kind of nuts. Well, I mean, we give a shit, but you know.
I mean, you guys who are watching give a shit.
Yes, you guys give a shit, obviously.
All right, so so it does look like there will be a week extension on the defense preparing their final statement. Again, we don't get to see or hear what closing arguments are, because it was determined back in September, I guess first week of October, that that they would be submitted in writing only, which cuts all of us out of the process of being able to if nothing else, observe this fucking, let's use John Pilger's word, charade. Because it is. This is Stalin and the show trials that went down in the Soviet Union during that regime have nothing on this. Like, the number of people that have made this comparison have said the defendants in Stalin's show trials were allowed to stand next to their defense. They were allowed to be a part of the court proceedings. They built a goddamn fishbowl for Julian in the Old Bailey to match the one that was at Westminster, in order to make him seem like the scariest terrorist on the planet. And again, as a non-violent human being who does journalism and does publishing and does tech, like, that's a far cry from a violent offender, and it makes me so fucking angry.
Yeah.
Well, it's symbolic. The entire Old Bailey thing, like, that building has been used for the progression of atrocities against humans for centuries, and not once did it have a glass box inside of it until now. And the fact that it's the Old Bailey itself, which is reminiscent of the community that Assange himself was a part of, which is the anonymous community, and that being the opening scene of V for Vendetta with that building falling. I think that was part of the decision to hold this in this building, just as a way to just further demonstrate the power that the state has against him.
Well, with that, you want to go ahead and close out?
Do we want to, just because we're still here, play the Giannis testimony statement real quick? That, like, 2-minute video?
Yeah, I can play it. Mute.
Yeah, why not?
I just came out of the courthouse here in Athens, where I testified to the Spanish judicial authorities in a case against UC Global, a company that was hired by the American authorities to spy on us, that is, on all those of us who visited Julian Assange, the Ecuadorian embassy, during his incarceration there. I saw material that is shameful. I saw videos of myself. I saw photographs of my wife's visa. I've seen transcriptions of my private conversations with Julian Assange. Of course, none of that is a great surprise, but none of us, at the same time, have the right to accept this as normal. We have to fight against this normality of transparent citizens and opaque dictators, opaque governments, opaque ministers of defense. MERA 25, our political party, DM25, or Pan-European Movement, the Progressive International, is going to do whatever it takes to turn the tables on those who are killing Julian Assange as we speak in Britain's Guantanamo Bay by incarcerating 23 hours every day and night in strict isolation. We're going to turn the tables on them and turn them into the accused of crimes against humanity and of trying effectively to annihilate Julian Assange for the great crime of doing journalism, of telling us what our governments have been doing in our name behind our backs.
So that case, the UC Global case, continues. As we get more and more updates about it, we'll of course be bringing those. But Giannis was one of the people that was personally spied on while he was meeting with Julian in the embassy. So I'm sure this trial has a particular impact with him intimately being aware of the conversations that were had.
Well, and I think he made a good point too, that, we have to fight back against this just as like free people, because I've said it before, if they're doing this to Julian Assange, they can do it to you, and they will. So, it doesn't stop with him. Like we keep saying that, but I really think we have to drive that home. This does not stop with Julian Assange. They're coming for all of us.
And the tools that they use against Julian are tools that they've been using for the last 2 decades against activists and whistleblowers. And even longer if you look at an activist going to court, because there really is no public defense when you're someone that tries to obstruct a pipeline or someone that tries to take a stand against police brutality. There's no, well, I was doing this for the greater good defense that even allows to get entered into the courtroom in most cases those times too. So it's something, it's an extension of the state that we've all just accepted at this point. But I would like to thank everybody for hanging out with us. I'd like to thank Sean for joining us, Kimber and Josh for all their hard work behind the scenes. My name is Andrew Smith. You can find me on Twitter at Andrew Zigman. You can find us on Twitter at action_4 Assange. We do have tons of different tools up on our website, including pressuring your local congressional representatives to supporting Tulsi and Thomas Massey's bills. So you can check that out on there, as well as a bunch of other different calls to action for whatever you want to become a part of. But yeah, thank you guys very much for watching.
And I am Misty Winston. You can find me on Twitter at Sarcasm Stardust. I also have another show with my friend Jesse Zerwell called Facts on the Ground. We have a couple really cool things coming up this week there, if you want to go over there and subscribe. In addition to thanking Sean, our guest, and my co-hosts, obviously, and Sleepy and Kimber for all your hard work. I also want to thank everybody in the chat. You guys are awesome. Sorry I wasn't super active in there today, but I can't really type with gloves on, so it's weird. I was trying, but it's really not possible. So yeah, thanks. I appreciate it. Happy Halloween.
Yeah, I'll echo the happy Halloween sentiment. My name's Steve Boykin, and I host a show called Slow. I can't do that with fucking half glasses on. I host a show called Slow News Day, which you can find on the Rockfin, DLive, Library, Odyssey, and YouTube, but probably not for much longer. Please do tune in tomorrow when I welcome back to the show Jared Beck. That will be fantastic. Tuesday, Election Day. Me, Whitney Webb, and Jason Burmis, and Glory Jones. That should be all you need to know.
I could probably squeak in there too.
Really should be all you need to know. I have no idea what time we're doing this or when. I don't. I really don't. I think I'm gonna have to like fake an injury and take the day off of work just to make it happen. And then the following Sunday, I'm gonna have Juan Passarelli and Vanessa Beeley. So that will be incredible. Doing everything I can to get booted from YouTube, I guess, is what I'm saying. So make sure that you have a Rockfin account. Like you don't have to endorse the channel, but if you do, you get access to everyone's premium content. What I do with shows now is I leave them up free on Rockfin for 24 hours. And then set them to premium, except for the free Assange Vigils, which are always free. And hopefully that entices enough people over to the platform. You know, it's a rarity, and Burmis was talking about this, when more than 10% of your YouTube audience will follow you to a different platform. We're at about 35% of the Slow News Day audience over on Rockfin, which is huge. You guys are awesome. Thank you for that. Thanks always to Sleepy Josh on the ones and twos for setting up the show and the graphics for us today. And to my co-hosts, Andrew Smith and Misty Winston. And to you guys, we just love you. We do. You're awesome. So make sure that you keep coming back and hanging out for all of this. And if I don't see you all tomorrow, we will see you Tuesday. Good luck to us all.